San Francisco. San Francisco lost 6.3% of its population in a single year, the largest drop ever recorded for a major U.S. city. The exodus began when tech firms emptied towers, remote work took hold, and rents kept climbing. By 2023, downtown office vacancy smashed records. Over 30% of all office space sat empty, more than 29 million square feet, the worst vacancy crisis in the city's history. Subways ran, but streets emptied. Once bustling neighborhoods turned into ghost blocks. Tourists shrank, retail collapsed, and rental prices dropped. But safety, cost of living, and job stability turned many away before recovery began. San Francisco's failure isn't accidental. The city bet its future on high-paid tech salaries and dense office zones. When remote work hit, the foundation crumbled. Here's the brutal truth. Population collapse plus empty skyscrapers plus broken assumptions equals one of America's biggest urban failures. If this looks bleak, keep watching. The next cities are far worse and far more surprising. Los Angeles. Los Angeles County lost 123,418 residents in a recent 5-year net migration tally, one of the largest domestic outflows in U.S. history. Why are people fleeing? The rent and cost of living crisis alone hits like a hammer. California has recorded a net domestic outmigration of 407,000 people between 2021 and 2022. Housing costs and taxes are the top culprits. In November 2023, more than 26,000 residents filed change of address from LA to other states, a record exodus for a city still pumping millions through its freeways. Even the state admits the trend. Between 2020 and 2024, California lost 1.46 million net domestic migrants. LA didn't just bleed people, it headed the hemorrhage. Public transit clogs like rush hour, traffic gridlock hits daily, and housing still costs more than many Americans earn. The promise of sunshine and fame now comes with a chronic bill, and people are voting with their feet. Los Angeles didn't collapse overnight. It unraveled under unaffordable housing, broken promises, and the pressure of living where cost always wins. New York City. New York City lost roughly 546,000 residents between April 2020 and July 2023, a drop of about 6%, erasing nearly a decade of population gains in just 3 years. Last year alone, it shrank by 78,000 people, dropping to 8.26 million, the biggest recent one-year loss for any major U.S. city. Why did the Big Apple break? First, the cost. Housing, taxes, everyday expenses spiked after the pandemic, and many fled to cheaper metros or suburbs. Second, remote work. Offices emptied, commuters vanished, and big city living lost much of its appeal. Third, public safety, quality of life issues, and a deteriorating commute culture pushed more. Even foreign immigration couldn't keep up. International newcomers filled some gaps, but net domestic outmigration overwhelmed gains. What once seemed like permanent density and cultural magnetism now feels fragile. For many, NYC turned into a costly cage, and they walked out. New York didn't collapse. It imploded under rising costs, changing norms, and broken promises. Chicago. Chicago keeps losing people faster than any major city in the Midwest, and the data makes it impossible to ignore. Between 2020 and 2023, Chicago shrank by approximately 80,000 residents, falling below 2.7 million for the first time in decades. Illinois as a whole lost over 230,000 people since 2020, one of the worst population declines of any U.S. state. Why are people leaving? One word dominates the conversation: crime, or at least the perception of it. Homicide spikes in 2020 to 2021 hit national headlines, and even though numbers improved later, the reputation damage stuck. Families moved to the suburbs. Young workers moved to other states. Then there's the financial pressure. Illinois carries some of the highest property taxes in America, and Chicago residents feel it every year. Combine that with rising rents, inflation, and a slow downtown recovery, and the result is predictable. The city bleeds population. Meanwhile, nearby states like Indiana, Wisconsin, and even Tennessee absorb Chicagoans by the thousands because living there feels easier and safer. Chicago didn't fail suddenly. It slowly pushed people out through cost, fear, and uncertainty, until leaving became the obvious choice. Portland. Portland was once the poster child of most livable cities. Now, it's one of the fastest shrinking urban cores in America. The city lost over 25,000 residents between 2020 and 2023, the steepest decline in its modern history. Downtown Portland took the hardest hit. Office occupancy cratered, hovering around 50% of pre-pandemic levels, one of the worst recoveries in the U.S. Retail followed the collapse. Major chains left, small businesses closed, and foot traffic evaporated. Then came the perception shift. Portland's image flipped almost overnight, from eco-friendly success story to a national symbol of disorder, protest fatigue, open drug use, and homelessness. Whether exaggerated or not, the reputation damage triggered an outbound migration wave that neighboring states easily absorbed. Housing didn't help. Prices soared during the pandemic, creating a cost of living spike that pushed many to Idaho, Washington suburbs, or anywhere with cheaper rents and fewer headaches. People didn't stop loving the Pacific Northwest. They just stopped believing Portland could deliver the quality of life it once promised. Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. used to draw crowds with politics, jobs, and institutions. Now it's bleeding residents, and everything that made it desirable is creaking under weight. Between 2020 and 2023, the D.C. metro area saw a net loss of over 45,000 people, reversing years of steady growth. What changed? First strike, remote work. Tens of thousands of federal jobs, once tethered to agency offices, went hybrid or remote. That hollowed out demand for downtown housing almost overnight. Next, skyrocketing rents and a brutal cost of living surge. Median rent jumped over 20% in 2 years, pricing out many long-term residents. Crime and quality of life issues, protests, street-level disorder, complaints about safety, shook confidence. Public transit ran. But without office commuters and stable downtown population, metro and buses started losing riders. Washington isn't broken by design. It was broken by shifting work, economics, and social fractures. D.C. didn't collapse overnight. It unraveled while people changed where they worked and decided to live somewhere else. San Jose. San Jose, the capital of Silicon Valley, is now one of the fastest shrinking tech hubs in America. Between 2020 and 2023, the city lost over 35,000 residents, while Santa Clara County as a whole dropped by more than 80,000 people, the sharpest decline in its modern history. What caused the meltdown? Start with the obvious: cost of living. San Jose has one of the highest median home prices in the nation, hovering around $1.3 million. Even six-figure salaries struggle here. Families and young workers gave up and moved to Texas, Nevada, Colorado, and the Central Valley, where housing doesn't cost a lifetime. Then tech cracked. Layoffs hit Meta, Google, Amazon, PayPal. Thousands of jobs evaporated. Hybrid work meant fewer employees needed to live near headquarters. When tech spreads out, Silicon Valley loses its gravitational pull. San Jose didn't fall because tech died. It fell because the cost of being near tech became impossible, and workers realized they didn't need to be there anymore. Seattle. Seattle wasn't supposed to be on this list, but the numbers say otherwise. After a decade of explosive growth, Seattle quietly flipped into decline. Between 2020 and 2022, the city lost over 20,000 residents, reversing years of tech-fueled population gains. What happened? First, remote work hit Seattle harder than almost anywhere else. Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Meta, the giants that once pulled talent into the city, suddenly told thousands they could work from anywhere. And they did. Second, Housing costs detonated. Median rent jumped past $2,300 per month, and single-family homes climbed near $900,000, pushing middle-income workers out to Tacoma, Spokane, Idaho, or straight to the Sun Belt. Third, Seattle's downtown took a massive hit. Office occupancy plunged, transit ridership tanked, and stores shut down. Add rising concerns about safety, drug use, and homelessness, and people simply decided they'd had enough. Seattle didn't collapse like San Francisco or fade like Portland. Its decline is quieter, driven by remote work, cost pressure, and a city that suddenly stopped feeling like an upgrade. Seattle was the surprise success story. Now it's the surprise exit story. These 8 cities didn't fall overnight. They were pushed by cost, by policy, by remote work, by fear, and by the simple math of living somewhere that no longer makes sense. And millions of Americans decided to walk away. If you want to know why people are running to certain cities next, tell me which one I should break down, and I'll expose the full story in the next episode.